You could hear the screams of the men in the church. I saw they were torturing the men, hitting them with their guns. There were more screams. They began to take the men out by groups. We thought they would let them go, but no, they were killing people by groups.
She is Rufina Amaya, one of the only 3 survivors of the massacre El Mozote in Morazan, El Salvador. On the morning of December 11, 1981, the Salvadoran Altecato Special Reaction Infantry Battalion arrived at El Mozote Canton and began one of the worst massacres ever witnessed in the history of the 20th century.
Thanks to Rufina's courage, we now know what happened during those 3 days of indiscriminate violence and human atrocities. The testimonies of those that survived this regime of terror have the power to unveil the truth and expose how their loved ones and everything they possessed were violently taken away by the militarized regimes of the time. Rufina witnessed the murder of around 1,000 people. She lost her husband and 4 children. The youngest was only 8 months old.
In Latin America, the polarization caused by the Cold War created a new era of domestic militarism and intervention, specifically in Central American countries. Terror techniques based on a counterinsurgency ideology such as extrajudicial executions, bombings, burning of fields, forced disappearances, torture, and massacres were used to silence any slight resistance or discomfort against the government. Throughout the 20th century, much of Central America suffered under economic issues and a series of harsh oppressive dictatorships. Many countries had deep wealth gaps and were governed by a privileged and small economic elite who became increasingly wealthy while most of the lower class lived in extreme poverty. Being one of the most strategic regions in Cold War politics and a vital source of raw materials, Central America was the target of the United States. The U.S. believed that Latin America was in need of a major force for stability and orderly and political economic development to protect their interests. Their work and support of military oligarchies helped to worsen the economic and political crises that the lower urban and rural class populations were suffering under. The U.S. helped to overthrow left-wing leaders in favor of right-wing authoritarians, trained Latin American soldiers to fight the guerrillas, provided money and weapons to brutal dictators, and as a last resort staged full-scale military invasions, all in the name of the containment of communism and the protection of economic interests.
First, they took the young girls and left their mothers crying. They went to rape the young girls. Then, they continued to take the women. Those that cried the most were taken sooner. They took my children from my arms. 2 soldiers pulled them out of my arms and took them and threw the smaller ones to the floor. The oldest one grabbed the baby, and there they stayed.
The Salvadoran Civil War was waged between 1979 and 1992. Like many other civil wars throughout Latin America at the time, the parties involved were the right-wing Salvadoran military government, supported by the United States and her capitalist allies, and the left-wing Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, or the FMLN, which received assistance in the form of arms from the Soviet Union and Cuba. Prior to the 15th of October 1979, Carlos Humberto Romero was the president of El Salvador, and his time in power was marked by increasing state violence in the face of escalating protests and dissent due to El Salvador's intense socio-economic inequalities. However, on this day in 1979, the government of Romero was overthrown by a military coup, and instead the Revolutionary Junta government, or the JRG, came into power. The JRG's main intention was to re-establish order and stability in El Salvador, and the government insisted on a wider respect for democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. However, much like the Romero government, the tactics employed again tended towards systematic political violence and the silencing of political opponents through the operation of death squads, extrajudicial killings, mass attacks on civilians, and enforced disappearances. It is estimated that in 1982, civilians were being murdered by the government at a rate of 300 to 500 deaths per month.
When I got to the line where they were killing the woman, fighting for my children, I ended up last in line. When I got there where they were killing the woman, that's when I hid. I snuck under some tree branches that were there, and then I stayed between 2 trees pulling down a branch with my fingers so they wouldn't see my feet. The women were holding onto each other, pleading not to be killed. They pleaded from their hearts not to be killed, to be taken away, but they weren't hurt. I stayed there from 5 p.m. until around 1 a.m. I saw them go by with groups of women, and then, after they killed them, they set the house on fire. A child was crying. Maybe a woman wouldn't let go of her child. and they also burned him. When the fire was going, the child cried, and they said to a soldier, "Look, you didn't kill that motherfucker very well. Go and kill him." And then there was a shooting, and then the child didn't cry.
This increasing transgression from the state led to the formation of various left-wing guerrilla insurgencies, which in 1980 came together to form the FMLN. This organization had the support of Christian-based communities, which were influenced by liberation theology, a combination of Marxist ideologies and Christian theology. According to the World Peace Foundation, the most violent periods of the Salvadoran Civil War were between 1979 and 1981, and again from 1981 to 1984. The first of these was characterized by mass counterinsurgency efforts from the JRG, which included the massacre, displacement, rape, and disappearances of the rural civilian population, whom the JRG perceived as harboring and supporting guerrilla groups. It was in this period that the El Mozote massacre occurred, despite the village's relative neutrality in the ongoing civil war.
They said, "Let's go, we kill all the men and women. It's all done. There's just all those kids left. A whole lot of kids. We're going to kill them." The one said, "No, the children aren't to blame. Let's not kill them, let's take them with us." But the other said, "If you don't want to kill the children, we're going to kill you." Some soldiers didn't want to kill them, but they were forced to. I didn't see it, but I heard their screams and their fear, their tribulation saying they were being killed with bullets and knives. That's what they said, yelling for their mothers and fathers. I heard their screams, and that's why I wanted to get away, but I could get myself killed. It was hard for me. That's why I cried and cried.
In 1990, 3 survivors of the El Mozote massacre, including Rufina Amaya, denounced the massacre in a court in San Francisco Gotera, Morazan. The case is now on trial. However, no intellectual and material author has been convicted. The Salvadoran Civil War resulted in the deaths of up to 75,000 civilians. Even today, justice for these atrocities has either been delayed or denied due to a combination of factors, including corruption within the El Salvador government and its judicial system.
La bandera de los pobres flamea en las barricadas. Afina la puntería, la bestia gris ya ven desbandada.